Good evening. Welcome to this edition of Huns History. My name's Hansel. I'll be your guide today. This is our first installment of Huns History, so we'll briefly talk about what we're going to do here. Joining me is Bill Overton, and Bill and I have discussed putting together an oral and video history of the Huns through a series of interviews during this time of coronavirus lockdown, which you kids will read about in the history books years from now. There's a lot of aspects of Huns myth and culture that we wanted to really get down on video and have people have an opportunity to hear stories that they otherwise would just hear after 12 beers late night at a bar. So they can go back and check this out. So thank you for joining us, and welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Hansel. It's good to be here.
So, we kind of went back and forth of creating some way to chronicle the history of the Huns for years to come. You want to talk a little bit about it from your side of things?
Sure. I talk a lot. I try to type up stuff and started doing these old casts just sort of tongue in cheek. And, guys seem to like the old casts better. One guy said hungover on a Sunday morning, it's a lot easier to watch a 5 or a 10-minute video than it is to read. And, a lot of guys for a long time have been talking about how do we capture Huns history. And no one wants to go and read archives on a website. So it just seems to me that interviewing people, kind of key old boys and kind of middle level old boys would be a good way to get that started. And, the other day you thought up some cool ways to do it. And here we are giving it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for being part of this first one so we can kind of work the kinks out. So I noticed your shirt, Pat Lochridge, the Memorial Tournament. Tell us a little bit about Pat. I met Pat. I never got a chance to play with him or around him. He was not really part of the club when I came in. But tell us a little about Pat and his vision for the Huns.
Well, Pat was a charismatic guy, a true leader, a good rugby player, kind of a funny Pat Lochridge story. Darrell Royal, the legendary Longhorn football coach, wanted Pat and Tom Barton, another Hun, when they were in college to walk on for the Longhorns. And Pat told Darrell Royal, no, we're going to play rugby. At the time, they were playing for the Golds. But I think it's fascinating that Pat would rather play rugby for a thrown together kind of rugby club than be a Longhorn football player. And that's just how much he loved rugby. I played with Pat for about a year and a half. He was winding down on law school. We were a really good club with the guys Pat recruited. They beat the Blacks as the Golds. They beat the Blacks a couple times in '72 and won the Austin and Houston tournament. So that basically made them the champions of Texas. And then Pat went off to Argentina for a while. He'd lived there as a younger man and learned to play rugby there when his father was working in Buenos Aires. And he kind of thought up forming the Huns. And, he copied San Isidro. And a lot of guys say it's because of the legend of, San Isidro at one time were all players for Alumni Club. One guy spilled wine on his pants, so they told him he had to leave. He took his pants off instead. Then they really told him he had to leave, and all his buddies took their pants off. And they got kicked out of the club. So they formed their own club. They were anarchists. They were rebels. And so Pat prided himself on being a rebel. But I think that choice was also a little bit of shade thrown at the Austin Rugby Club because Carlos Puentes, the founder of the Austin Rugby Club, was an alumni old boy. So coming home with our hoops style jerseys that we wore all the time was kind of a bit of shade thrown at the Blacks by our founder. I think above all, he prized himself for being a rebel, an anarchist. He didn't want anything to do with rugby politics. He just wanted to get some guys together to play rugby. And if we won, great, but brotherhood was above all.
That's great. Yeah. And it's great to hear it just laid out that simply and for everybody to hear about, because I know we all hear the legends of Pat, the legends of the Huns getting created. So that's great to hear. How do you think, and we're sitting here chatting and hearing about this, how do you think this history project will help preserve the ideas that Pat promoted?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting. I know when you hear Kirk talk, he talks about feeling like he was a failure at his first practice, and John Banks put his arm around us and said, "You're coming to the bar. You're one of us now." And that was kind of what Pat did too. We were shorthanded when I started playing, so anybody that came out was valuable. And I think if you look at how we have emphasized all three of our sides, how we welcome, brand new players, other clubs don't do that as much. There's a lot of other clubs that turn away people that have no rugby experience. And so I think we're still continuing that. I know Kirk talks about it. I'm interested to hear what guys like Luke Ashley, who's in the Hall of Fame, and Joe Daly, who are close personal friends of Pat, say. If you remember a lot of the induction speeches at the Hall of Fame banquet, everybody talked about brotherhood on the Huns. So it seems like over the years it's doing pretty well.
Absolutely. So what about yourself? What was your, let's talk about games, because I know that's, there's a bunch of social things that we love to do, but that one time on the field when somebody asked you about playing for the Huns, what's that one moment that just pops in your memory, good or bad?
Well, we beat the Houston Heathens, who were the best team in the state, one fall in a non-cup match, but they were by far the best team in the state. And we put it together and beat them, and that might have been their only loss that year. David Peterson will correct me if I'm wrong, but that was in the fall of 77 or 78. And that was an incredible victory. I would say probably my best Huns experience, though, was in a loss, in a road trip to the playoffs, that famous school bus picture. We all went to Shreveport. We lost because they had an incredible fly half that could kick for touch and kick for posts like crazy, which back in those days was really the whole game. And we lost, but oh my God, did we tear the town down that night. I can't even tell the stories on a family program. It was an incredible experience. And, those guys, I send them that picture to this day, and we all still laugh about it.
I can imagine. No, that's awesome, man. Well, anything else you want to close out with?
No, I'm really glad we're doing this, and I'm really glad our club is emphasizing Pat, or trying to remember Pat. We've really had a great comeback the last 2 or 3 years from a dark season, and we've done it around community culture, rugby, and Pat was all three of those things. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, and thank you. Great idea, and I'm just happy to be part of it and help out. So stay tuned in the weeks to come. Bill and I will be posting several videos. We will be posting these on Facebook for you to check out, and then of course we will have an area on the website devoted to the video history of the Huns. If you're interested in doing one of these chats with Bill or I, please reach out to us. Is it Bill O at hunsrugby.com?
Yes, sir.
Or Hansel at hunsrugby.com. You'll see it right here in front of me, because I'll put it there later. But thanks a lot for joining us, and up the Huns.